starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
It is Thursday morning. Thank you for joining us here on Real Talk. This show presented, as you know, each and every day by the team at Bitcoin Well. We talked to CEO Adam O'Brien just, what was it, sir? A couple of weeks ago? A few weeks ago, it feels like, something like that. I think Adam was on the crypto. We had the crypto roundtable with Adam a while ago. You remember he was on with the guy from Forbes? Yeah. And so, anyway, we're talking about what's going on in El Salvador and yada, yada, yada.
Yada, yada, yada.
Because it's so huge. This El Salvador story is so huge. If I start talking about it, we're not going to talk about the things we need to talk about on the show today. So Focus. When we go off air every day, I dig deeper and deeper and deeper into this. And then I pop up for air again in the morning, and I'm like, hey, here's my daily crypto report. And the team at Bitcoin Well would be like, no, we've got lots of
don't worry about
stuff
it, Ryan.
to talk about too. We're the experts, not you. You're supposed to refer people to us. All right. You know where you'll find Bitcoin Well? I mean, at least on our website, is right at the top of the sponsors tab at ryanjesperson.com.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Coming up in about 10 minutes, we're going to talk to the executive director of Pride Toronto, and then we're going to talk to Constable Tad Milmine. I think it's Milmine, actually. I've spoken to Tad before. I've spoken to the constable before. We'll just do it in real time. We keep it real on Real Talk. Is it Milmine? Is it Milmine? He'll probably say is, why don't you go back and watch the interview we already did? Tad was on talking about bullying. It was Pink Shirt Day when he joined us. I'll remember, one of the things I remember is that Tad comes on and he's a Calgary police officer, and he's got his uniform on, and everything's that representative of this police officer. When you see a police officer and you see the hat and the badge and you see the whole, and there's obviously that imposing presence, right? Like when a police officer walks in, you're kind of like, ooh, you can't help but notice. I was always fixated on the gun as a kid. You always stare at the gun. Wow, now I'm fixated at the taser. I'm always like, look at that tape. I'm just fascinated by what cops are carrying on their belts, right?
Do you ever wonder, could I get that?
Grab it? Sarah Hoyles.
It's just like when you go to the edge of a building and you're like,
I should jump off?
Yeah, like you're like, whoa, what was that thought? How did that thought get in there?
Do you know I have this? I don't know why I'm thinking of this. We have a couple minutes for story time, so it's okay.
Okay.
Back in the day, my buddy, who I told you about, Ryan Laudermoser, a while ago on the show, he's going to be like, I'm getting 2 shouts out on Real Talk, and what on earth is going on right now? Boy, I miss that guy. Laudermoser and I are traveling Europe. We're 19 years old, and this is, kids, before the internet. It was before the World Wide Web. There was no such thing as smartphones. There wasn't even email, believe it or not. So we're traveling, and the Lonely Planet Guide is like the Bible for travelers. Probably still is to a certain degree. I'm sure there's an app now or something like that, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But
you had to have the book.
Yeah, then the pages were all, oh my gosh, I'm noticing the intersection of what I'm about to say with a segment coming up later on the show, but the pages were all dog-eared. We're going to be talking about dog's ears later on today, by the way. What do dog's ears have to do with veterinarians and mental health? That's coming up a little bit later on in this broadcast. A little later on in this show. The pages are dog-eared, and I remember we're walking through Venice, Ryan and I have this, that we're walking over one of the bridges, the Canals River. It's this stunning city. And I remember thinking, I should throw this Lonely Planet guidebook into the water. Just to make a statement, or to have a moment of where we're going, we don't need no guidebook.
That's right. We are cutting our own path.
Same sort of a thing. Probably the consequences would be less dire than trying to relieve a police officer of their firearm.
I've never done it.
I think that's what winds you up: tased, cuffed, and processed.
I believe so. I think that would be one of
if you're lucky, actually,
sure, fast way.
If you're lucky,
yeah.
But listen, okay, so we're being silly and glib, but for a lot of people, the imagery of law enforcement is actually quite serious, and some people would say triggering. And the debate around police officers and Pride has been one that has been going on for years. We talked a while ago, a few weeks ago, as part of our Pride Month coverage with queer historian Darren Hagen, former Edmonton city councilor and legendary Edmontonian Michael Fair, talking about the Pisces Health Spa, the raid, and of course LGBTQ2S plus people have been subjected in many cases to harassment, discrimination, violence, etc. at the hands of police. Now, some people will be saying not all police, and I'm looking forward to having Constable Tad on, who's going to be joining us out of Calgary. Of course, his story is a remarkable one. It grew up under, quite frankly, horrific circumstances. He was abused through his childhood. He came out as gay in his adult years and then became a police officer. And this guy, I've never met him in person, but I'll tell you, boy, is he ever an impressive individual. So we'll get kind of two sides of the story on Pride and police, and that's going to be coming up on the show today. We've also got, as mentioned, a segment on veterinarians and mental health. Why is it that so many veterinarians are experiencing mental health challenges and in many circumstances more likely statistically to die by suicide than many other professions? What's going on? What's the reason? We were prompted. This was an audience member that reached out originally. I remember somebody saying, was it a vet or somebody else? I think it was somebody talking about vets saying, one of the things that's really difficult about the profession, this is about to hit you like a Mack truck, by the way, if you're anything like me, but they said dealing with and trying to assist so many animals where you knew that the injuries were not accidental. And that kind of went, ooh, I know, I can tell it just hit you right now.
Yowzers.
Right? And so that's like one thing. That's like one thing that you might not think about that comes with the territory, right? So we'll talk about veterinarians and mental health today, and we're also going to take a look at a remarkable story. It's rooted in tragedy. I think it's a good news story. It's a good news story. We can call it a good news story. From residential school to resort. We're going to talk to a former chief. Sophie Pierre will join us. We're going to learn a little bit more about St. Eugene Resort, what it was, what it is now, what that says. I'm expecting that to be a great conversation. And it's also launch day. If I may.
For what? For what, Ryan?
Well,
what are we
Sarah,
launching?
I'm glad you asked. Today, June 17th, it is my honor and pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to officially release, in partnership with my friends at Edmonton's famed Sea Change Brewery, Jespo Pisco Sour.
Ooh.
It's only been released today. Our Patreon supporters had a shot at it yesterday. They were able to pre-purchase. We know that this is going to sell out. And we've already been seeing evidence that some of our Patreon supporters were there early yesterday at Sea Change Brewing in person, just south of the North Saskatchewan River, just south of White Avenue in beautiful Edmonton, Alberta, picking up their pallets of Sea Change's Jespo Pisco Sour. Some hooligans even had cold cans down by the river. Sarah, what's the story here?
Oh, boy.
Pardon me for a second. Okay. 8:38 Mountain Time. Thursday, the new Friday. What's going on here in this photo?
This is my pal Ranger, the doggo. We were hanging out on the riverside with my friend Max and his dog Winston, and it just felt like the right time because the sun is beaten down, and you want to just crack a cold one on the riverside.
Is Ranger inclined? I mean, is Ranger a beer dog? Is Ranger a?
Are you asking? Have I given my dog beer?
Yeah.
I never have it. But I know that
you never have. Ever.
Okay, so this begs the question: have you ever given your dogs beer? Yeah.
Yeah. People are going to be like, you're having a vet on later today, and you're starting by talking about giving alcohol to dogs. No, I just know I've been around dogs that have trained themselves to knock over beer bottles. They don't knock over bottles of water. They don't knock over kids' orange juice. They consistently knock over bottles of beer and try to clean it up off the... As a matter of fact,
whoops.
Well, one of our pups, not mine personally, but a guy I know, we believe that his dog actually has a drinking problem. Like when that dog comes in, everybody's like, watch your beers, because he comes in like he's the guy that's like waiting at the liquor store at 8:58 a.m., which is fine if you're there to pick up Jespo Pisco Sour from Edmonton's Sea Change Brewery. There you have it. The art is absolutely unbelievable. That's Pete Nguyen and the amazing team there. You're going to see on the can a QR code, which has my face in it, by the way. And if you scan the QR code, it'll take you right to our website, ryanjesperson.com. There's also a story on the side of the can telling you why Pisco Sour. I mean, why is sour anyway? And why is everybody already calling this the beer of the summer?
Why everybody is calling this the beer of the summer.
And I don't even make money from this. So it's not, my enthusiasm is rooted in the grassroots. As a matter of fact, it's rooted in the weeds. In the Weeds is the organization that will benefit from this. This is our collaboration, Sea Change and myself, to benefit In the Weeds, which is an initiative we think right now that's more important than it ever has been, providing mental health supports for people working in the hospitality industry. And it's been a very difficult year. We'll call it a year and a half for people working in hospitality for obvious reasons. And oftentimes we know that the barriers to mental health supports come in the form of cost. And those are some of the barriers to access the funds, the cost, the availability of counseling. In the Weeds is doing an amazing job with that. You can link to them on Instagram, on Twitter. I've linked to them in my posts. I encourage you to check out your favorite cold beer store, your favorite craft beer store. Ask them for Jespo Pisco Sour from Sea Change. If they don't have it, ask them to order it in. We think it's going to sell out in about a week. I hope you enjoy. And be like Nick. Nick sent us this photo yesterday. Nick, of course, is one of our Patreon supporters. Just a hell of a guy. And he was in touch with us. He said, check this out. Just cracked a cold one, Jespo. Cheers. So Nick, one of the first people on planet Earth to get his hands on a cold Jespo Pisco Sour from Sea Change Brewing Company. Nick, thanks for your support to all of our Patreon supporters and to everybody that's going to get their hands on a Jespo Pisco Sour.
Sorry, what is it called?
It's the breakfast beer of the summer. I mean, it's almost, though, it is almost to the point, I believe, 18 minutes from now, if my math is correct, it'll be 5 o'clock in London, England. So for those that are tuning in Western Europe, it's right about that time. And for everybody here, don't judge a guy. We're independent, right? We're independent. It does feel a little weird to be crushing beers at 8:42, but there you go. It's launch day. What do you want me to do?
What do you want?
What do you want me to do? Other people are chiming in with people have really, really unfortunate ideas of what is the beer of the summer, and also some people are being very serious about alcohol and dogs. Yeah, don't be giving your dogs beer, ladies and gentlemen, unless it's after supper. Then they can have kind of like then they can kind of have a after supper. Then they can get into kind of like one of the Mike's hot at the producer station, FYI. So we're gonna get into that kind of stuff. Let us know your reviews on the Jespo Pisco Sour. Want to remind you before we get into our serious stuff here, Police and Pride coming up in just a second. The team at Friesen Brothers is taking orders online right now for their Father's Day barbecue box. This is the barbecue box that you can order and pick up in Stony Plain, Fort Saskatchewan, and South Edmonton. They get you started in the morning with the sourdough cinnamon buns. Then you make your way through. They've got absolutely everything covered. I've already seen one myself. All right, who are we kidding? I tore into it, and it's absolutely fabulous, including the Alberta beef that comes with the barbecue finish. I mean, wow, Dad, with a Father's Day barbecue box from those 3 Friesen Brothers locations. There's 16 locations across the province right now, proudly featuring BC cherries. They've just got a huge shipment in, and those things are gone. Those things are gone within days. Friesen Brothers has been around, proudly Alberta-owned, Alberta-grown, more than 65 years. Check out your Friesen Brothers today. Also wanted to remind you, if you're looking for something to really knock Dad's socks off, what about a reinvention of that outdoor space? He wants to get to it, but he's busy. There's stuff popping up. Can you imagine just saying, hey, Dad, this spring, this summer, we're working with Eden Landscaping. You're going to get that outdoor cook station. You're going to get that fire pit you've always wanted. And you know what? you're not the one that has to bust his hump to make it happen. Let Mike and the team do that. They've been making people's dreams come true, transforming outdoor spaces for more than 20 years. You can check out what they're doing at landscapeedmonton.ca. That's the team at Eden Landscaping. Well, it's been a number of years since Pride celebrations, Pride organizations across the country, and as a matter of fact, around the world, many of them have taken a stand banning police officers, at least officers in uniform, from participating in Pride. Now, one of those organizations in Toronto. As of January 2019, uniformed officers have been indefinitely barred from participating in Toronto's Pride Parade. Sherwin Modeste is Executive Director of Pride Toronto, kind enough to make time for us this morning. Sherwin, thanks for being here. Good morning to you and a happy Pride Month.
Thank you, and happy Pride to you too.
Before we get into it, I always like to talk to people in the context of Pride and ask them what Pride means to them. We hear people talking about how it's been rooted in protest. Other people talk about how it's a personal celebration. Other people don't observe it at all. Some people tell me that they're super annoyed by Pride. So what does it mean to you?
So for me, it is being me and being my authentic self. And I have to say that since moving to Toronto, I have had the privilege or the honor of being part of Pride. So it is an opportunity for me to really speak and to show that there are others in the world that do not have the same rights that we have here in Canada and other parts of the world. So yes, for me, it is a celebration, but it's also a protest.
How have you seen Pride? I mean, in the years that you've been participating, now you're obviously steering or leading a pretty prominent organization in Canada's most populated city. How have you seen Pride evolve, and how do you perceive that evolution to have been prompted? I mean, what's been the driving force behind some of the changes?
So again, I think we have seen a shift. I remember, being part of Pride in my earlier days when I did not see myself as a Black gay male. I did not see myself represented in Pride. And when you look at Pride today, it is very diverse. You also did not hear a lot of the history of Pride in relation to the Stonewall and the trans women, predominantly trans women of color, that, led that first protest, led that first Pride. So now you can really see everyone represented in Pride. And for me, that is very, very, very important. And we're getting to the point now where we're able to balance the protests with the celebration. And for me, that speaks volume to the gains and the work that has happened.
When it comes to banning police officers, at least uniformed police officers, from participating in Pride, I don't want to take anything for granted and assume that we know why that's the case or how that has come about. Can you take us into the history of this decision? And I know that there's been some back and forth. Back in 2018, police officers were invited back. In 2019, there was the indefinite ban. Can you give us a peek behind the curtain, so to speak?
So again, and one of the things is that, so I'm new to the role of executive director. And however, I've said to the membership, I've said to the board, I've said to staff that I will be honoring the wishes of the membership. The membership of Pride Toronto have spoken in relation to not wanting uniformed police in the festival. I think it's really important that we understand the history and the context of police and the relationship with the 2S LGBTQ community. And it has not always been favorable. It has not always been positive, like for many other communities. One of the things that I think it's really important is that, one, we have to acknowledge that wrong was done to the community. We also have to be able to say sorry. And we have to allow time for healing. And I think I am not saying that this is going to happen in 5 years, it's going to happen in 10 years. But I think it's really important that the community allow the 2S LGBTQ community an opportunity to heal from the years of, the harassment, the years of, being persecuted because of their sexual orientation. So that healing process is going to take time. And I think we need to give the community the time. And when the community thinks it's the right time to invite back the police in some capacity, they will do that.
So it sounds to me, and I don't want to, it sounds to me like you're motivated to, or at least open to, seeing police participate again at some point. Is it fair to describe that as one of your longer term goals? Would you see that as progress in the right time?
Exactly. And I think the key words there is in the right time. I think, I will not close any doors as executive director, but it have to be done in the right time. The right process have to be in place. And the membership, I think it's really important. As you and I are speaking today, trans women of color are being persecuted, are being misgendered. We continue to have those struggles, and the serial killer, I refuse to say his name, that was on Church Street, that did not help to build the relationship. So whereas in some cases we would have think we are going to make some steps forward, we've made a few steps backward. But again, I think you're right. I am open to dialogue. I'm open to conversation, but it have to be on the right time, and it have to be an opportunity. Again, this is not about the executive director. This is not about politicians. This is not about police. This is about the individuals that are most affected as a result. There are still survivors of the bathhouse raid in Toronto that can still speak to that. And those are the things that we have to allow that healing to happen before we can move forward.
Sherwin, a friend of mine, I won't identify him, but he's a proud gay man, and we've had these wonderful conversations about why he can't stand Pride, why he does not participate, and one of those reasons is because, and he's a very contemplative guy. He's very deep. I love the way that his worldview works. And I guess what I could cut to the chase and say he can't stand the rainbow washing, so to speak. He doesn't like that there's banks and oil companies and architecture firms and everybody wrapped in the pride flag, everybody wrapped in the rainbow flag. He can't stand that part of it. Where do you land on that? Because on one hand, I get it. I mean, I don't totally get it, but I can try to understand. On the other hand, to me, it's like, hey, look at all of these, I guess it can prove to be a controversial word, but all of these allies, either individuals or corporations that want to step up and say, hey, we have workplace policies in place. We support our staff. We're progressive in our thinking, all of these types of things. So where do you land on that? Is it more complicated than some people might realize?
And I can speak for Pride Toronto. And one of the things that we're very proud of is that any corporation that we take money from, they would have gone through what we would refer to a 2S LGBTQ screening tool. So there are some things that they have to have in place. So yes, and we greatly appreciate the contribution of the private sector has tremendously helped us to achieve some of the things that we have achieved. So we welcome the opportunity to partner with private sector. We welcome the opportunity to partner with government. But at the same time, it's really important that we recognize that Pride, and again, speaking for Pride Toronto, we don't just take the money. There is education that happens. There is, guidelines that are set. So if you do not have a workplace policy around 2S LGBTQ issues, we will not take your money.
Right.
And we have had to say no to some private corporations.
That's a good thing, though, right? I mean, if you think about it, I guess in a way, participation in Pride, if it's been vetted like that, and if those standards are upheld, then it does send a message to attendees. It sends a message to the general public that these agencies, these organizations, these corporations, whatever the case may be, have walked the walk before they're walking in the parade, right?
Definitely. To be a sponsor at Pride Toronto, you definitely have to more than talk the talk. You also have to demonstrate you're willing to walk. And we know that not everyone will be able to do a 10K. It may start at a 1K. But the goal is that you have to show that you are willing and that you are determined to get to the final destination with Pride Toronto. So, and we don't just say, no, we don't want your money. What we do is that we work with you. We're working with organizations to say, these are some things that you need to put in place in order for us to get there.
Sherwin, I'm sure you've obviously seen this piece. Nicole Brockbank, a reporter with CBC News, this investigation, the story surfaced a few days ago about Pride Toronto taking about $250,000. It looks to me like you're eager to talk about it, which is good. This federal grant to mark the controversial milestone, the decriminalization of so-called homosexuality in Canada, to make an effort, a concerted effort to bolster ties with police. People can read the report in its entirety about where the money ultimately went. There is certainly some controversy swirling around this. I know you can say you were not the executive director when this went down, but how problematic is this for you, and what's your public position on it?
And you know what it is? I do not see it as problematic. Again, we're partnering with different levels of government is something that Pride Toronto have always done and will continue to do. And yes, we received the monies. However, there was a shift. There was a shift from, and yes, on paper, homosexuality was decriminalized. However, in theory, it was not. Okay. We heard from the membership, we approached the feds and were able to have the conversation on how we can redirect the monies so that these monies will be spent in the community. And I truly appreciate the federal government working with us to address some of the concerns, like no one is safe until we're all safe, addressing some of the concerns that the community has brought forward in terms of 35 years of AIDS activism. So those are some of the things that the monies were spent on. So I will not apologize on serving the community in such a way as Pride Toronto did.
Sherwin, I'm going to be talking to a Calgary police officer, a police constable, right after I talk to you. He's really a remarkable guy. He's done amazing advocacy. He's a survivor. He's an abuse survivor himself. He's an out and proud gay police officer, and he's done a ton of amazing advocacy with his initiative, Bullying Ends Here. What would you say to a guy like Tad? And I've not yet talked to him yet. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but who might say, I'm proud to be a gay police officer. I'm proud to see young, LGBTQ2S plus people that would maybe consider a career in policing, or that maybe might envision some sort of a future where that could be somewhere where they feel called. I love that they can see me, that they can see themselves reflected behind a badge, right? We talk about representation in society in so many different ways. What would you say to a police officer like Tad? That obviously I would imagine there'd be, we'll ask him, but I would imagine there'd be great personal meaning attached to marching in his uniform.
And I will say to Tad, thank you very much for service, because I think it's really important that we thank our first responders in so many different ways. But I think, again, one of the things I will clearly say is that there is work that needs to happen, and they can be one of the leaders. They can start the conversation within their police department in Calgary, and that conversation can continue into bigger cities like Toronto. So I say, let us work together. This is not about, separation, but again, the parade is not the only place. At Pride Toronto, there is still police on the footprints, okay? We need to even have the conversation around how can we reduce that sort of enforcement, that fear that police even bring on the footprint. So I would say to Todd, let us continue the conversation, because it is very important.
Let me ask you this. I mean, this is sort of circling back, Sherwin, on a question I've already asked you, but I do like the way Erica's watching us live on YouTube right now, and she says, I'd really love if you could ask Sherwin. I mean, how are these relationships, these positive relationships, supposed to occur? How does the work start? How does the process start? For example, between police and the LGBTQ2S plus community, if police are outright banned. It sounds to me like you're talking about changes in policy. It sounds to me like you want to see a difference in how policing is conducted. I mean, when it comes to this healing process, it's a pretty rude question for me to ask you. When is that done? When is that complete? When can we set our alarms for? But how does that happen? And when do you know that there's been meaningful enough progress?
And again, and this is not for me as the executive director to decide. This is going to be something that will be decided by the community. Too often, we tend to want to push our agenda, and the community get left out in the process. So I say, you know what? For some communities, it may take 5 years. For some communities, it may take 10 years. And let's be honest, for a white gay male, it may take 5 years for them to be healed and ready to invite police back in. But for an African Caribbean gay male or an indigenous male or a trans woman, it may take longer. So we really have to not try to put time on it, but allow that healing to process. And it have to be happening on both sides. So while that healing is happening, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you mentioned the training, the recruiting processes, just a different way of doing policing must come about, because one of the things you don't want is to be healed and then to end up right back to where you started at square one. So I think this whole process will take time, and we have to. I'm asking the community to give the 2S LGBTQ community the time that is needed. They've been hurt for many years, but we will get there. I believe that we will get there.
Sherwin, I've really enjoyed speaking with you, and I appreciate your time on this Thursday morning. Thanks for it.
Thank you very much, and have a good day and stay safe.
You bet. Happy Pride to you. That's Sherwin Modeste, Executive Director of Pride Toronto. In just a second, we'll get another perspective on this, and I feel like, I better begin with allowing Tad to speak for himself, the good constable, as opposed to imposing a perspective on him about what marching in the Pride Parade might mean to him. That's coming up in just a second. I want to remind you right now that this studio is powered by the team at Westworld Computers. They've got us all set up with what we need to make this show happen. They do the exact same thing for households and businesses. They've been doing it for more than 40 years. Family owned, going up against the big guys, providing customer service they can be proud of, including their team of service techs that have seen everything that Apple, everything that Mac has ever developed. If you're looking for an upgrade, keep in mind that their team will transfer data from your old unit to your new one, whether it's an iPad, iMac, MacBook Pro, whatever. They'll transfer it over for free. That's just part of the service you get when you visit Westworld. You can check them out online. They'll ship anywhere via westworld.ca. Also, big shout out to the team at Park Power. You know that Sarah Hoyles, the producer of the show, keeps an eye on our hashtag through the course of the broadcast and the rest of the day. Real Talk RJ, the hashtag is powered by Park Power. If you go to parkpower.ca right now, internet, electricity, natural gas, you can choose who provides that for you in the province. Why not choose Park Power? $70 off your first bill with the promo code 2021-Real Talk. Constable Tad Milmine is a police officer out of Calgary, Alberta. He last appeared on Real Talk on Pink Shirt Day. We were talking about bullying. Tad has done an amazing job with his initiative, Bullying Ends Here. You can check it out at bullyingendshere.ca. It's a real pleasure to welcome you back to the show. Thanks for being here, Tad. I feel like I'm blowing it pronouncing your last name. Can you remind me how you pronounce it?
Milmine.
Milmine. Perfect. Well, thanks for making time for us. We thank the Calgary Police Service for giving the green light to this interview and for you making yourself available. Constable, what is pride as an out, proud, gay police officer? What does pride mean to you?
For me, it means representing the community the best way that I or we can. It's being ourselves. It's being out there, not just for Pride Month, not just for Pride Day, whenever our cities are celebrating it. It's 365 days out of the year. And for me personally, it's being my true, authentic, genuine self in hopes that I may be able to help others, to those that need it most.
Have you ever participated in a Pride Parade in uniform?
I did a couple of times when I first came to Calgary. So I believe it would have been 2014, 2015, maybe 2015, 2016. An incredible experience, absolutely incredible experience, overwhelming support from the community. it was a lot of fun. It's the first time I've ever been in any sort of parade. So it was a unique experience for me for sure.
So what is it when you see, we just talked to the executive director of Pride Toronto, super reasonable guy. He strikes me as very thoughtful and contemplative, strikes me as having good leadership qualities. He says, hey, listen, he kept deferring, which I think is the sign of a good leader in a circumstance like this, saying it's not up to me to determine when police will be welcome back at Pride Toronto. New York City, New York Pride's just banned police officers following in Toronto's footsteps. When you see this, where does your mind go? What does this do to you?
Well, at first, Ryan, when I think 2016 was the last year that we, in Calgary anyways, were permitted to march in uniform, it was a shot to the gut. It hurts. It felt personal. It felt excluding. It was very difficult. But then you have to take the step back and recognize, but it's not about me. It's not about how I'm feeling or what I'm doing. This is about our community. And although we're never going to have 100% support from anything, that's just what makes humans so wonderful, is that we're always going to have opposing views and thoughts. The fact is, there's room for improvement. There's always going to be room for improvement. And as I said earlier, this is where my role comes into play. I can't change anybody else. There's only one person I'm in control of, and that's me. So it's important to me to lead by example as best I can every day.
Yeah, you are kind of, I guess, in a way, an example of where change starts, right? I talked to Sherwin, and he's talking about he wants to see changes in policy, wants to see changes in how policing is done. We talked about all different sectors and industries and organizations and who qualifies for, participating in Pride and how. But what does impacting change look like on the so-called front line? Not the so-called. You are on the front lines. You're the first guy in when people call 911. What does that look like? Would you characterize yourself? Do you see yourself as a change maker?
I think there was a time that kind of crosses your minds, but you recognize that, historically, police, as far as the LGBTQ community is concerned, we've had a very negative past with some of the actions that police did under not just what the police did alone, but also under the guidance of what the laws were and the directives of government or what have you. I can't change the past. It's there's only the one thing I can do, and that's just by being myself. And I'm very lucky that I work for an employer that accepts me for who I am. They're very open and welcoming. But at the same time, we as an entire service and services across this country have a lot of work to do. But like I said, we're never going to have 100% agreement on, everyone wants us in a parade or wants us in Pride or wants us in anything. It's and you said it best. It's not just police. It's other industries. It's other services. It's other companies as well. That positive change has to start from somewhere. And I'm not the only one in the service. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of us that are out volunteering in our communities with, youth sports or homeless shelters or what have you. It just doesn't make the news. It's but that doesn't mean it's not happening. So positive change has been taking place for a long time. It may feel like it's at a glacial pace because it's not making the news. It's not something you see every day in the headlines. All you're seeing is the negative, but there's so much more out there. There's so much more to the story that just doesn't get shared.
Constable Milmine, let me first of all be very clear that I'm not attempting to paint all police officers with the same brush or to slander police officers. I'm grateful for police officers' public service, and I understand that many people have complicated relationships with the police. I approach this from a point of privilege. My understanding and my background with police has been largely positive. I understand that for many people that is not the case. Here's the point I want to make. I think that within policing, when we talk about things like mental health, and we look at the military, we look at police, we look at firefighters, and there's this real kind of a macho culture, right? And in many circumstances, mental health professionals have been trying to find ways to get officers or service persons to be able to rethink how they can personally stigmatize reaching out and seeking mental health supports, for example. In other words, it makes you strong, not weak. It's an injury. Look at it as the same way as blowing out your knee. You know all this kind of stuff. Now, with that macho culture can also come an implication of a pervasive or a deep-seated homophobia. Do you experience that? Do you see that? How would you characterize the culture within the police? Let me say the policing world. I'm sure you're with the Calgary Police Service, but I know that nationally you're taking a look at how services and forces are operating.
Sure, I work with services all across the country. I know
Yeah.
you said in the introduction that bullying ends here. So I think if anyone can not speak for, but speak to, my experience is I've been openly gay. And as you know, I'm in the media quite frequently. I've never, ever, ever experienced anything in the line of work from my employer, my former employer, or anywhere across this country that even had a feeling for me that I felt uncomfortable, I felt unwelcome, I felt that there was some homophobic fears or thoughts or innuendos. Absolutely none. But I'm not taking away from anyone else's experience, because there could be very well another officer that I work with that feels the total opposite.
Mm-hmm.
I can only share my own lived experience. I haven't felt that. But to your first point about mental health, I appreciate that there is that sense of the macho culture. I think that is that is more so in the past than it is in the present. And the reason why I say that is, again, from lived experience. I mean, I work on a team of, there's about 15 of us. We talk almost daily about mental wellness. I speak very openly about the fact that I see a psychiatrist every Thursday. I take a little white pill every morning. I share this with everybody. And again, the reason why I share that is because I want to start helping to remove those stigmas that are slowly going away. And I know that for a fact because I speak to my counselor, and she said, like, the visits from frontline officers, whether there's police, fire, ambulance, they're going up. So I think that macho culture is starting to crumble. It doesn't crumble overnight. You and I can have all the conversations today in the world about it. It doesn't make anything go away. It takes time to change habits and behaviors and thoughts and stigmas. And that's why I'm so appreciative that you have me on your program, because we can talk about these things. And that's where we have to start, is communication.
Yeah, well, you'll always be welcome here. I want to ask you a question. This is actually an audience member, Erica. We asked her question to the executive director of Pride Toronto, to Sherwin, Modeste, and I want to just ask you the exact same question. Erica wonders, how do police and marginalized communities, she says in this case, the LGBTQ2S plus community, but I suppose, and I like that Erica alludes to the fact that this could include other communities as well. We could have this conversation in other contexts, but we're talking about pride and policing now. How do we, or these groups, start to rebuild or start to build a positive relationship if police are outright banned? If Calgary Pride or Toronto Pride or New York Pride says the ban is indefinite, we're open to lifting it, but healing needs to happen, time needs to pass, and change needs to be evident. How does that come about?
I don't know, Ryan. I don't know, because of the fact that I can't even pretend to be in someone else's shoes on their lived experience.
But what can you do from the policing side, Tad? What can be done from the policing side anyway, when it comes to practices?
Yeah. Right. It would be exactly what we're doing. So again, I can speak for Calgary Police Service. We have a gender diversity sexuality board that meets. We, as a service, we have an employee resource group. We have many out members. But we need to have those conversations with the community groups. And I know there are a lot of groups out there that meet with CPS for the various diversity units that are there. But we need to have even more to the table that come, because the people that are coming are already receptive to having the conversations with police, because that's why they're there. But if there is a fear for, let's just say, for instance, people are fearful of the uniform, how do we overcome those fears? And I think the conversations need to be had of where are those fears coming from, because fear is taught, but that's not to take away from someone's lived experience. I work in a high school, and I know there are youth in that school that are fearful of the police, but yet they personally have never had a run-in with the police whatsoever. So I think the questions need to be how are these fears coming about? And I think once we start getting to the root of it, I mean, there's a lot that I can do as an individual. There's a lot that we can do as a service and as an industry, being policing. But I think there's a lot that others can do as well, from our community groups to the media to communications, social media, those sorts of things. So I don't think, Ryan, there's one way to do this, because I've never been privy to what happens behind the scenes for the pride groups that vote or hear from the community, but. I know there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work to do, and it's forever changing. I feel that just since I've been a police officer in 13 years, I think we've actually come a long, long ways. I mean, the fact that I feel safe and comfortable being out is something that I would never have been able to imagine before I joined the service. So you can see that just for me personally, there have been some positive steps forward, but again, I can only share my own experience. So I'm sorry I don't have a flat out, this is what we need to do. It's ever evolving. And I think the most important part is we need to listen.
Yeah.
That's the biggest one.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember last time we spoke. I think you were in uniform last time too. And I seem to remember you were wearing almost like a pride bar, like almost like a rainbow sort of thing. Do you wear pride colors or those rainbow colors like 365, or at least, when you're on duty is what I mean? Do you wear that all around the year?
Every single shift.
Wow.
I wear it with pride, with permission, and like I said at the very start of this conversation, is the fact that pride for me is not about June. It's not about in Calgary, the last week, first week of July, August. It's about being your true, authentic self every day, and not just when I'm in uniform, but when I'm outside of uniform as well. I mean, I'm up in a trailer park in Pine Lake. I've got a pride flag flying there, and it's gotten to the point there's 7 other sites around me that are also flying the pride flag, not just for June, but they actually put it up all season long. So. It can start with one person, but the fact is we need everybody. We need everyone to come forward. I know you're going to respect privacy. I'm not asking you to not. I'm not asking you to identify anybody, but can you think of an anecdote? I mean, has there been an experience, or has there been hundreds where you respond to a call where the immediate visual of that pride, those pride colors, either disarms somebody, or you could tell it made them feel more comfortable, or you could tell, I mean, do you experience that quite frequently? I do on the positive. On the negative, however, is that some of the most horrible, cruel, unkind things that I've ever heard have actually come from my own community. So I have had actually, unfortunately, more negative experience as far as words are concerned when I show up at a call. Words such as I'm a traitor, I'm homophobic. You name it, I've been called it. So
to be clear, you're Constable, you're saying when you say from your community, you're not talking about police officers, you're talking about LGBTQ2S plus people.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. Like, we're never going to have 100% buy-in. I mean, you'll remember, Ryan, it wasn't that long ago that the LGBTQ community was looking for representation in policing. We've come a long way. We have been able to not only bring people on board, but also bring people to the stage like I am, where you're comfortable being yourself and being out. But then there's always going to be somebody else. I mean, it was only last Sunday that someone put a meme about me saying, all gay cops are class traitors. It's and there's nothing I can do. I can't let that bother me. This is all the more reason why you have to be your authentic self and just stay the path. It's stay the course. It's worth the fight, because there's always someone watching that is going to see that pride logo or the pride colors and recognize that maybe they don't need me now. Maybe they don't want to have a conversation now, but they see it and they know. It's anyone in the LGBTQ community can spot a rainbow is small, like a little wee rainbow on a door in a school or in a workplace. It means a lot to us. So for me to wear it on the uniform is something I'm very proud of.
Constable Tad Milmine, it's always a pleasure to have you here on the show. As mentioned, the door will always be open in service with the Calgary Police. Looks to me like you're at your desk right now. Is that right? Or you're on duty? Yeah. Thanks for doing this. Thanks to CPS for the green light. People can check out bullyingendshere.ca. Tad's got just a remarkable survival story. You shared it with us last time you were on the show. Anybody interested can search our podcast archive, or of course our YouTube channel as well, for that interview where you so bravely share how you got to where you are. Tad, thanks for doing this. I consider you a friend. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate it. And back at you.
Yeah, you
Have
bet.
a wonderful day. Thanks for the conversation.
Yeah, happy Pride. You can follow Tad Milmine on social media. Again, bullyingendshere.ca. Wow.
There were so many amazing things, but both of those guests talked about listening.
Yeah. And both are like reasonable, respectable, quite frankly, people that I'd love to have lunch with, right?
Yeah.
And And that's also not to say that you can't be pissed off when you're talking about these types of things, or you can't be like, let me tell you something. I stopped myself from saying something, and then in true fashion, I will now say it. What I almost said, but what I am not saying on the record, is we didn't have like a militant voice.
No.
We didn't have an angry militant voice. But there's nothing wrong with that either, right? Everything's valid. People's opinions, people's experiences, people's perspectives, earned, imposed, or otherwise, are valid. And we want to hear them. To talk at ryanjesperson.com. I'm just kind of going to think on that. I mean, how can you I critique is not necessarily the word, but I mean, both of these two individuals came on the show and said, from our perspective, I mean, Sherwin's really interesting, right? Because it was sort of more like, here's my opinion, but also I defer to I'm here to listen. To me, I said that to me is a sign of great leadership. I can understand why people think that it's, some people just think it's absolutely ridiculous that police officers are banned. They say there's gay police officers. They should be able to proudly march. The symbolism is powerful. There's other people that say law enforcement should never. Like, they've got light years to go before they can participate. No chance, no way. Yeah. Wherever you are on those two spots on the spectrum or anywhere in between, we'd love to hear from you. Again, our hashtag RealTalkRJ or our email address, talk@ryanjesperson.com. That's how you grab Sarah's attention. The team at Grand Dog Essentials wants to remind you that through the course of each and every week, they're making deliveries. Depending on the day, it's a different city. But if you're in Calgary, Edmonton, or Central Alberta, in and around Red Deer, they're delivering quality, raw food for your dogs right to your door. It's what Ranger eats in Sarah's house. It's what Moses and Monroe eat in our house. We've been going to Grand Dog way before Real Talk launched, way before this partnership, because they figured out what our dogs needed. They're different meals for both of them because they're different dogs. They're certified nutritionists. They've got a great team, family-owned business. I give them my personal stamp of approval. I'm proud to each and every week here on Real Talk. You can use the promo code RealTalk at granddog.ca. If you want to take it for a spin, they'll give you 10% off your first-time order, again, at granddog.ca. Also, big shout-out to the teams at Dairy Queen of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. They've got their Father's Day cakes on special right now, $5 off, but you got to drop my name. You got to mention Jespo. You can mention Real Talk, and they're going to knock $5 off of Father's Day cake at the Dairy Queens in Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, Y Gardens, and Baseline Road. And don't forget, they're so proud to support the Stollery Children's Hospital Foundation, currently collecting donations for the Stollery at each of those 6 stores. This is a story that we've been paying attention to ever since it wound up on our radar that veterinarians around the world, and in particular, veterinarians in Canada, are experiencing mental health challenges disproportionate to mainstream society. As a matter of fact, according to statistics, brace yourself for this, Real Talkers. Statistics provided by the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association, 1 in 5 Canadian vets and technologists have reported thinking about taking their own life. The CVMA said a recent study found that more than 26% of Canadian vets have had ideations of suicide in the past 12 months. Now, how does that compare to the rest of society? 12% of Canadians reported to have seriously considered suicide in their lifetime. Dr. James Fairles joining us with the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association. We're grateful for it. Doctor, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thanks very much for having me.
I think for a lot of people, this subject matter is going to come as a surprise. They're going to be wondering, why veterinarians? Why are veterinarians experiencing more significant mental health challenges, at least statistically, than the rest of us? Can you take us into it?
Oh, there's certainly lots of reasons for that, and this just didn't happen overnight. As you can tell, I've been in veterinary medicine for a long time, and actually a classmate of ours just after we graduated back in 1980 took his life from suicide, and so. But there's certainly much more awareness now and more research around it. I certainly became involved in this when I was on the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association Council and becoming president of the association, where there wasn't that much discussion, and it's always difficult to discuss suicide in any setting, but there wasn't that much discussion. And other groups around the world in Australia and the United Kingdom were much further ahead than we were on doing research and things like that. And that certainly has caught up. Now, as to the exact question here, why, that's multifactorial. We're obviously always put in stressful situations with the concern that we don't have 100% information to make decisions. There's always that lingering doubt, am I doing the right thing? Certainly lots of pressures involved in the practice. Some even think, to get into veterinary medicine is a very challenging thing, and we're all A-type people and go, and that certainly is possibly part of it as well. So certainly a multifactorial issue.
There's obviously got to be and I don't know, one of the things that I can't really relate to is people in professions. I mean, I'm just coming off the heels of an interview with a police officer, and I know that first responders attend to scenes that will stick with them forever. They'll remember images or visuals or smells that will trigger their own mental health related responses. I would imagine in veterinary medicine there's a lot of that too. Do you walk with the burdens of people, even the idea of, what do you call it, euthanasia, like putting pets down? I mean, if you're doing 3 or 4 of those a day, you're seeing people's sorrow. I mean, do you walk with that kind of stuff?
Well, that's certainly an issue. Compassion fatigue, I guess, is the technical term for it. And I was in private practice for 25 years. I'm in a more administrative role right now, but after your 3rd or 4th euthanasia on the same day, you start to think, am I actually doing the right thing? And every time you go into one of those, certainly that human-animal bond is huge, and people are really attached to their pets, and that it takes a lot of discussion and work. Discussion and empathy and things like that with your beloved pet, and whether that's a cat or a dog, a horse, or any other animal such as that. It's a really tough decision when it comes to end of life and how that plays out. So certainly that's part of it.
Tracy's watching right now. She says, I'm always so amazed by our vet and the way that she has to basically solve mysteries every time we bring in our dog. The animals can't talk, of course. So it's all about best guessing. How do you find that confidence? How do you find the confidence that you're making the right decision?
Well, we've got lots of other tools. Obviously, a complete history. We rely on the owners to provide that, and the animals providing us with lots of clues about what's going on as well. Something like a pediatrician, I guess, on the human side of things. But and we have lots of ancillary resources, testing. Veterinary medicine is just as forward-looking as the medical profession as well, and reaching diagnosis. One of the issues we have, though, is it is a fee-for-service business, and sometimes there are not the resources to go as far as you would like to delve into problems, and that's where the guessing game begins. It could be this, or this, but we have to do this, and this to do things, and it's going to cost this much, and sometimes there's just that's not available. We've got
that comment from S. McFury, who's watching right now. It says vets have to witness the fiscal hardships that pet owners can face. How does that resonate with somebody? You see somebody having to make difficult decisions based on money. money alone on something that's a very emotional bond, an emotional connection. How does that impact vets?
That is a real tough one, and it does, it's part of the whole issue around our the mental wellness, both for the client and the veterinarian. There are some processes available in certain circumstances like that where we can avail ourselves of some help with some money. I can
Right.
think of a couple in Canada, but
you're kind of trailing off because you don't want everyone to realize that those resources are available, or every vet's going to go bankrupt.
I didn't get specific, but
yeah,
in certain situations.
Yeah,
and the other thing is, I did this in practice too. Sometimes the veterinarians chip in, doing things for either less than they should, or it all depends on the situation.
I bet it's like teachers buying all their own supplies, right? Colton's watching. He says, my wife is an equine. Do you say equine or equine?
That's a good question.
I'm gonna say. Well, they say equestrian, so I'm gonna say equine vet. Colton's wife works with horses and says it's her busy season right now. She's working 12 days on, 2 days off, 12-hour days. Wow. Colton says she works incredibly hard, but oftentimes Colton says vets are undervalued. An interesting question from a viewer that's wondering if you think there might be a difference when it comes to the mental health impact of being a so-called farm vet, or maybe more of a small animal vet, or why do we call it more of an urban vet? Do you think there's a difference?
My background is actually food animal medicine, so... but I did, in practice, I did mixed. I did everything. I don't think there is a difference. Food animal veterinarians are subjected to the same challenges, the same, there's financial concerns there in reaching a diagnosis as well. There's the compassion fatigue thing. In my current position, I've talked to veterinarians in disease outbreak situations who are helpless to save these animals simply because of the disease, and it is trying all the way around, whether you're a food animal vet or a
Doc. One of the reasons why we invited you to join us. I saw a comment from somebody that honestly kind of stopped me in my tracks, because I guess I hadn't thought of this before, but in the context of veterinarians and mental health, and 1 in 5, more than 1 in 5, essentially 26%, 1 in 4, saying that they had ideations of suicide within the past 12 months, which is remarkable. I mean, to me, that's like when I go into my clinic and there's 4 vets in there, statistically, one of them has thought about that this year. And someone left a comment that said, for a veterinarian, it's very difficult to encounter cases where animals have sustained injuries where or at least you strongly suspect that they are not accidental. In other words, you are dealing with the aftermath. I mean, the pet's dealing with the aftermath, but you're assisting an animal that is being abused. Is that something that you think is a pervasive issue? Is this something that vets talk about in the context of mental health?
That gets into the moral and ethical dilemma veterinarians have, and that certainly is part of the whole mental wellness picture of anyone that is dealing in that situation, whether it's the veterinarian or others that are involved. Certainly, in many of the I live in Ontario, so I know the Ontario situation. That if you suspect abuse, you have a obligation to report it, because abuse of animals obviously relates to other abuses as well, and on the human side of things.
Would you characterize that as common? Maybe common's not the right word, but has every vet seen it?
I can only go with it is not common, but it is not. It is, when it presents itself, it is really concerning, and you've got to do a lot of soul searching, and that's not just on the companion animal side either. That's all veterinarians are confronted with that.
Well, I would imagine, again, not to stereotype or paint with broad brushes, but I would imagine on the food animal side, you'd see it more, wouldn't you? I mean, you may see appalling cases where a pet, someone's dog is being starved or beaten, or, I mean, animals are even sexually abused, but I would imagine that when it comes to pigs and chickens, and I mean, there are some circumstances we've seen undercover investigations, absolutely appalling conditions in some circumstances. I would imagine you'd see that as a vet.
I would say that's very uncommon, though.
Okay.
Those sensationalized cases are not the norm. I would like to characterize that all of those that raise food animals have the morals to treat their animals correctly, and they do.
Let me ask you about this Ears to Vets campaign. Have you seen this? Let me put this in front of you. This hashtag Ears to Vets. This is out of the U.S., but it's obviously, as is the case on social media, everybody's taking part here. You take a photo of your pup's ears, you share it on social media using the hashtag Ears to Vets, and you tell us why you appreciate your vet in the post. And here's some. We just snapped up a few of these. We Rate Dogs, which is obviously an amazing account. Hi, everybody. We're working for the last couple of months on a campaign to discuss the mental health challenges within the veterinary profession. We've interviewed several vets and their dogs. Hope you listen to their stories. You can watch that video. It's a great video. And then here are some of the other tweets that people are putting out. I mean, it's just really great. People talking. I mean, look at this, right? There's something about a dog photo that's just, I don't know, it does something. And you can see all these people sharing photos of their dogs' ears. Such good boys. 14 out of 10, these dogs. But what does this do? What does this do to a vet like you, Dr. Fairles? And what does a campaign like this say, do you think, to the profession? I can see the big smile on your face.
Well, I think anything to offer encouragement is great. It really, a sense of purpose and offering encouragement for what we do and being appreciative, all good things.
I love it. I'm so grateful. I mean, I should mention that you've been doing great work, of course, chair of the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association Wellness Advisory Group, a client services vet at the University of Guelph Animal Health Laboratory, and of course a longtime professional. Dr. James Fairles, our audience will find you on Twitter at SkyVet. Thanks so much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thanks very much for having me.
You bet. Good conversation, and this is another example of stories that are put on our radar by our community of Real Talk audience members, which I really appreciate. I knew that the live chat, I was curious. I was talking to the good doctor and I wasn't watching the chat, but I thought when we drop into this, I'm sure that people are going to be taking the opportunity to talk about their pets and to talk about the relationship that their family has had with their veterinarian. I mean, Kelly Jo just says, how do they do it? Yeah. Vets are amazing, right? Shalane says vets being asked to perform services for free must be so draining and so heartbreaking. That's a real conundrum, right? Because
well, vets, I would assume that vets get into it because they love animals and they want to work with animals. And so they are obviously there for what is best for animals. And so if someone can't pay, feeling this pull,
yeah,
but it's also their job, it's
100%. It's complicated.
Yeah.
It's like that. The Facebook relationship status sums it all up. It's like you're either this, that, or it's complicated. How about this from Nadine? How much would this mean? Nadine says, my vet stayed open longer so I could be with my boy after he passed. And I was so grateful for that time to say goodbye. Adventure Cycling says, when we had to put down our girl Daisy the Great Dane, due to a brain tumor, the vet was crying as much as we were. It was so hard on us. Tracy. Our vet once spent 30 minutes with us trying to figure out where the scrapes on our dog's sides came from. After 30 minutes, we realized the doggy door was too small. Amazing. Amazing.
But the care and time taken to, look at the animal, talk to the owners. I loved that piece that the vet just shared with us. The idea that, you have to kind of you have to look at the behavior of the animal and look at the signs on the animal, but then also talk to the owner and get kind of a sense of, so what's going on? The doggy door is too small?
Yeah.
Got it.
And then you've got dogs like ours and certain breeds and then certain dog. And again, I'm slipping into just talking about dogs.
Right.
And I know that now Big Cat, like the cat lobby, is going to start hitting us. And then people are going to wonder, like, why are we discriminating against horses? Nobody's even mentioned budgies, let alone reptiles. And then, of course, fish just always get ignored. I mean, you imagine being a fish. You're like swimming around. You're looking outside the aquarium, and everything looks good. You've got the Great Dane over here, and the beautiful what's like the sexy, like the Persian cat. Is that the one you want? The Persian. What's the cat where everybody goes ooh?
Oh, the Maine Coon
or the Siamese, the Maine Coon.
Yeah,
I'm annoyed at Maine Coons right now. As a matter of fact, nothing they did.
What? How
I'll
can
get
you
back.
be a-
I'll get back to my imagine being a fish exploration, this intellectual exercise. This is what happens when it's launch day, when you're launching the Jespo Pisco Sour from Sea Change Brewing Company into the beers before 9 a.m. Mountain. I'm going to go on these intellectual explorations. But Maine Coons, I'm a little bit annoyed at. And for some, so it was about 2 years ago, I'm walking South Edmonton, south part of the city, bit of an industrial park, and I see a cougar. A cougar. A cougar.
You saw it because usually you don't see it; you just feel it.
You just feel it on your back.
Yeah,
Before
on
it
your
sinks
neck.
it. Before
Yeah.
it sinks itself into your jugular and introduces itself. But so it's literally walking behind a sea can. It's in the middle of the city, and I'm watching it for like 30 to 40 seconds. Like what? Like I'm processing what I'm seeing. And it's got that kind of a lurk. Like I'm talking, this is, it's like 40 blocks out of Edmonton's River Valley.
Okay, I'm with you.
South side of the city in an industrial park. And it's got that long tail. And like, I hike and I go out and people are like, it must have been a lynx. I'm like, it wasn't a lynx. Lynx have stubby little tails and big paws and they walk in an interesting way with the big, this was a cougar. So I got like this kind of like lousy video of it on my phone. I got like 4 seconds of video and I slowed it down to slow motion so you can see it going. And people are going, it's a Maine Coon. It's not a Maine Coon. It's like 125 pounds. And so I literally, I don't know if you know this, but I used to work at a radio station.
No, that's new.
Yeah.
That's brand new
Yeah.
information.
As a matter of fact, the big cat, the cougar, was actually like 100 meters away from the radio station.
Whoa.
Which was amazing because I walked into the newsroom and notified everybody and they snapped into action. No, just kidding. They were all like, it was probably a Maine Coon. I'm like, you dummies. Not really. They were my colleagues and I always treated them with respect. And so I literally reached out to a wildlife biologist at the University of Alberta, sent her the video, said, please analyze this. Tell me I'm wrong if I'm wrong. And she wrote back and she said, no, that's absolutely a cougar 100%. And I said, well, you must come on the air and say this publicly so I can silence my critics about these Maine Coons. You saw a Maine Coon. And so sure enough, she came on. She's like, it's actually not as unusual as you might think. She said, it is unusual. It's very unusual that you saw it, but it's not. People might be surprised to know that these big cats can be in the urban center. She said, it's an adolescent, looks like an adolescent male, was probably booted out. She said, he's probably hungry. She said it was, in fact, a cougar. So there you go. Wild story. That was just a couple of years ago.
And so that makes you hold a grudge.
Well, so now my buddies
against-
roll now because now the thing always comes up. Like I say to my buddies, like, we'll be golfing. I'll be like, did you see that shot? And they're like, it's probably a Maine Coon. And I'm like, oh.
I mean, in Maine Coon's defense, they are big cats.
They're huge.
Like they are beefy.
They're incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like 80 pounds or something. They're
Majestic.
like these big, we're going to get back into this. We're not going to get back into cats and dogs and who works for who and who's better. But the fish, nobody thinks of the fish, right? You're swimming around in your tank and like maybe it gets cleaned from time to time. The food they're giving you, like what? Like have you ever smelled fish food?
Yes, I have.
And you're looking and the dogs are getting like the table scraps and like chewing on the bones and the cats are doing whatever they want. The humans are working for the cats. Cat gets a little tumor and everybody runs to the vet and it's serious business, right? Fish starts to like limp swim a little bit and it's flush later. Like there's no fish vet. Maybe, maybe for the whales in captivity and the dolphins and all of those other poor animals.
But that's a really good point. And I don't know if you meant to make this point, but the idea that
Probably not.
vets have to have a huge range of knowledge around all different animals. I mean, some of the anatomy is the same, but if you're looking the difference between cats and dogs, the difference between cats and, say gerbils, birds.
Well, imagine being like, I need you to diagnose why my horse is limping, and then why isn't my snake eating?
Exactly.
You know? And also, like, people that are coming in, it's like, you know, like I got bit by a dog this weekend. I don't know if I told you or not.
No.
Yeah, like bit. It's fine. I mean, I tried to pet him like a fool.
Did you ask?
I didn't ask. I did not seek consent, and I should have. I should have probably clued into the fact that this 160-pound, just an absolutely beautiful Mastiff Dane cross was on a harness big enough for a horse, and was sitting at his owner's side. I always feel weird saying owner. He was sitting by his human side, and I went, "You're such a good boy," and I reached out to scratch his ear and snap. And he just, it was a tap, but it was like a quick tap. You know what I mean?
It was a warning shot.
It was a warning shot,
Yeah.
but like, I will rip your face off. It was one of those. And we kept our distance for the rest of our time together, which was brief. Karen Gay, and the reason I say her last name is because I knew I recognized that name because I'm actually holding an email in my hand from Karen, who's also making a comment on our live stream. And Karen, I live stream, and I hope that this makes your day. Karen wrote in to say to us, as part of hearing the truth. Remember when Joanne Saddleback was on and she said truth and reconciliation? She says, people want reconciliation. She says, we're not done with the truth yet. What a powerful conversation that was. Karen wrote into us right after. She says, as part of hearing the truth, she says, you need to interview somebody about how they turned the Kootenay Indian Residential School into the St. Eugene Golf Resort and Casino. Karen, that's coming up on the show in about 15 minutes, and we're so grateful for that suggestion. You put it on our radar, and that's why we're doing this interview. That's coming up in 15 minutes. But Karen's also chiming in on the live chat right now. Says, you know, there was an old horse in a lot of pain that we had to put down. Karen says we had her in a separate pen from the rest of the horses, and one by one, says Karen, the other horses came to the fence to see her and say goodbye. Karen says they knew.
I had to put my dog down, a year and a half ago. And my vet, she's incredible, but she said, you know, if you want to do the, what do you say? I mean, I've said I killed my dog because that's how it felt. I had to kill my own dog, which was gut-wrenching. But I knew that it was, it was the right thing to do. It was time. She let me know. And
oh, you're going to make me cry, Hoyles. How did she let you know? She just like,
well,
do you want to talk about it? We don't have to talk about it if you.
I love talking about Emma. Emma Bemma.
Emma.
Yeah.
What kind of a dog was she?
She was a purebred mutt.
Yeah.
She was like a German Shepherd, Roddy, Blue Heeler cross mix.
It's like a smart maniac.
Oh yeah. And if I didn't move fast enough, I got told with a little nip.
Oh, that's the Blue Heeler.
Yeah, totally. We did agility together, and she would nip my heels. And she'd be like, "Can you hurry this up, Sarah? Get on it. Let's get this ramp going." Anyways, so she, the vet said you'd probably be happier at home doing this, and I knew because a friend of mine said, "You know, what are your dog's 3 favorite things to do?" And I was like, "Well, eating, going for walks, and." What would be the other thing? Eating, going for walks, and just like spending time with me and being with me. Yeah. Because it's me. And she stopped wanting to eat and she couldn't go on walks anymore. And it's like, if she loses, I don't want to get down to 0 on this because quality of life. So, and she was starting to have, this is, okay.
You probably didn't expect to talk about this today.
I didn't.
Do you want me to jump in for a second? Or do you want to keep going? Do you want to honor and keep going? Or do you want to honor her memory? And let me jump in for a second and cut me off if you want.
Okay.
I don't remember the human's name, but I'm pretty sure the dog's name was Bruce. Wasn't it Bruce, the beagle? Sam, do you remember this? Who was it? Was it Bruce? There was the dog that, it was a positive reflection that was submitted. I'm so embarrassed I can't remember.
A beagle? Are you talking about the beagle that passed away? And
they were honoring, and he was singing, and the guy was playing his guitar, and we were just like all like, was it Kipper? Was it Kipper?
Yeah.
How does Sam remember that? I don't know. Anyway, lucky to have you, pal. Sam remembers the dog's name. I don't remember the point I'm trying to make. No, but do you remember the email and what he said? He was sending it in for positive reflections, and it was in memory of Kipper. And I think it was the 1-year anniversary of Kipper's passing. And this audience member of ours had to make the difficult decision to put Kipper down. And the way that he characterized it, I thought was very powerful and like insightful and also like oof, where he said, I made the choice, or I realized we had hit the point where, I can't remember the exact words, but he basically said where his pain was more important than mine, right? In other words, he knew it was going to, like, as a human, because it does feel, I've never done it yet, and I'm dreading it. I'm dreading it because I never had a pet growing up, aside from a newt, and nobody thinks those count for some reason.
They
Sorry,
count.
little fella. They do count. I cared about my
What was
newts.
his name?
Well, I didn't name them because they kept getting out, and I just get new ones. So, but I did still care about them, and they have little personalities, and they always reminded me of like little characters in Star Wars, and they'd eat the little what are they called, like the mealworms or whatever. And anyway, but not like, it's not like a dog, it's not like a cat, it's not like a horse. I don't know anything about horses, but I'm obsessed with them. And that's something that I dread because I know that at some point that'll happen. It's happened for everybody. Everybody talks about the Rainbow Bridge. You see it on social media. Your friend posts a photo and you go, oh, I'm so sorry. And then you, of course, think about your own dog and you go hug your own dog or your own cat or whatever. You go ride your own horse, whatever you do. You send out your peregrine falcon and do the exercises with it. And, your pigeon keeper, whatever your pet is, you love that pet more. And I've always thought that in a way it kind of, I guess, feels like you're playing God because you're like, you're driving your pet to the vet, or you can have people come to your home, which I think is wonderful. I noticed that some of our audience members have said that, they've stayed in with their animal, and I've read some social media posts from vets that have always said what they've, and again, I don't mean to come across as judgmental. I'm not judging because everybody is on their own journey, but the people that will take their animal to be put down and will leave and not be in there. And this vet's post that I was reading, I got emotional reading it. Yeah, big surprise. But the vet was saying, like, your pet is always looking for you. Oh. Your pet is always looking at the door, always looking for you. And I've seen some of our audience members say it was difficult, but I stayed in there with my pet. Well, and of course it's the compassionate move. And of course it's to ease suffering, and of course it's ridiculous for me to even venture into a conversation around medical assistance and dying for human beings versus pets. And I just think is a little bit ridiculous and disingenuous. But at the same time, it seems to be consensus with society that when an animal's suffering, you put it down. And we certainly, I don't think, mainstream in society view it that unless the individual's making the choice themselves.
But the animal can't
do it.
Can't say that. And so we have to be our animal's advocate. Yeah. And I, as a child, the dog that I grew up with, Misty, she was a little Cocker Spaniel. I was away tree planting, and I wrote a note to my parents saying, because Misty was getting really old, if Misty needs to be put down, please call me. Because I think I might have had one of the flip cell phones at that point. Yeah. I was like, please call me, and I will come into town. Like, I will come off of the block, and I will come into town. My mom didn't call me. She took Misty to the vet. I'm sorry, Mom, I'm going to tell a story. And she left her. Yeah. And so when it was Emma's time, I was like, I'm not going anywhere. I am right here with you. Yeah. And so I got the vet to come. There's like vets on the go or something. And they came. And the reason why I was telling this story is Emma was on the ground. Obviously, she couldn't really walk anymore. I had gotten her a wheelchair, and she was having seizures. And it was just dignity. Her dignity was, she was a very proud dog. And she was on the living room floor, and I was fostering a cat at that time, and I have 2 cats of my own, and and I also was dog sitting my sister's dog. So it was a bit of an animal house.
So you were Dr. Doolittle at the time.
I prefer Snow White. And
right.
And
I don't think I've ever actually seen Dr. Doolittle, so maybe that was a huge insult. I have no idea.
But all the animals, I kid you not, came and made a semicircle around Emma.
Wow.
And
witnessed it?
And sat with us. And
wow.
Then Millie, one of my cats, Millie, because I was, of course, the big spoon, I was spooning Emma as she was leaving. And
crossing the Rainbow Bridge.
And Millie came and lay on my side. And the vet stayed. And she was like, I will stay.
Our audience right now is like, and I would imagine people on the podcast too. People tell us all the time they listen to this while they walk their dogs. They listen to Real Talk at the dog park. Craig says, "I'm not crying, you're crying." You know, Marie says, I've stood by every one of my animals that I've had to put down. It's hard, but it's my obligation to them. I did the same when my parents passed, said Marie. I was with them. Lynn says, one of the hardest things. This is one of the hardest things. My almost 16-year-old whippet, Priya, passed away 2 years ago. Lynn says, I'm so grateful for our many years together. I think of her every day. You guys are going to make me cry.
I think it's a privilege.
Megan says she's bawling holding her shepherd right now. Yeah, of course it's a privilege. Of course it is. Kelly Jo says her eyes are leaking. Lisa says her Roddy passed with his head in my lap. She says, I know he didn't suffer, but it was so hard. Have you seen, we can't play it on the show because the algorithm will shut us down. We're learning about YouTube as we go. I can't play you any clips from other shows. Used to be able to do that on the radio. Can't do it here. Freaking copyright. But I will say, if you want to really ruin your day and make your day at the same time, I mean, if you want to have a moment, YouTube Jimmy Stewart with Johnny Carson, the dog named Bo, or my dog Bo, or my dog named Bo, or something like that. And it, like, it's Jimmy Stewart, first of all. It's freaking Johnny Carson, first of all. But he goes in, he starts reading this poem, and it's kind of like it's a bit of a sleeper out of the gates. Like, it's a guy reading a poem about a dog, and then it just, you'll know when it just like, boom, you get into it, and by the end you're like, like it's and like, don't leave Real Talk now to watch it. Watch it after you're done with Real Talk. But I'll tell you, it'll ruin and make your day. Adventure Cycling says it's so hard to put a pet down. It's just a really, 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 really hard day when we had to put down Daisy. KJTM says we decided we made the appointment the next morning. She was out there chasing birds. Like, it was the best day of her life. Crazy James said he said goodbye to 3 longtime cats, longtime family members in fewer than 2 years. He says it destroyed me. And Patrick says we still have time left together, so we're going to make things memorable. I love that perspective, too. Patrick says Patrick's dog was just diagnosed with multiple types of cancer this week. People are always, you know what I always think about, too? People are walking with things. You never know. My parents taught me that my dad is like, you would never believe that my dad is my dad because he's so chill. He's like maximum chill. He's a physician. He's retired. He's a retired physician. He's a poet. He's very contemplative. And we always had this awareness with him and my mom. They'd always talk to us about, like, my dad behind the wheel, like me behind the wheel. Not so much now because I'm driving sponsor vehicles.
Right.
But when I'm in my own unmarked car, I can be the guy that is like a little bit excitable behind the wheel. You might describe me as a confident driver. And
an assertive driver.
I have the ability to be an assertive driver. I'm not like a get out with a crowbar guy. Like, I'm not like that guy. But I just, like, I'm the guy that always, like, Carrie's always saying to me, my wife, like, when we're driving and when I pass people that, like, they're in the passing lane and I have to pass them in the right, I'm always looking over.
Oh yeah.
She's like, why do you have to look? I'm like, why do I have to look? If you know, you know. But my parents would always say, I remember them saying this, like, we don't know what anybody's day is like. You know, somebody that's going like 40K below the speed limit on the freeway because their dog's just been diagnosed with cancer, or they've just lost someone, or they walked in on their spouse cheating on them, or they just lost all their money in a bad deal, or their child just was diagnosed with, or like whatever. We just never know. Yeah. I don't know. I'm feeling kind of like we gather here. We talk about this. This isn't like your standard show. This isn't your average podcast. And I love it. Like, people are just sharing right now, and we don't have time to read all these, but keep sharing. I love it. Jen says, I'm trying to work while listening to you as usual, and you got me today as usual. Jen says, we got a COVID puppy. I'm a brand new dog owner, and now I cannot imagine life without him. Jen, welcome. If this is your first dog, I'll tell you, I look back now and I'm like, how did I not have dogs before? I can't even imagine. Right? I mean, I could do without the dog hair on all my clothes. I have more lint rollers now than I ever thought I would buy. Those are just, little reminders. Little reminders of the fella. Yeah, there's just little reminders. Monroe's of the guy. Like, hey. Yeah. As I'm hosting events and people are like, did this guy just roll in from sleeping on the carpet?
Yes, and
the answer is yes. We're grateful to have the support of the team at Local Ways to, of course, present Trash Talk. That's coming up tomorrow, and you've still got time right now to get your trash talk in. That's right. We're taking your angry emails. Not necessarily always venomous, though. Like last week, if you heard Trash Talk last week, the bar has been raised, my friends. A little humor, a little alliteration, quick and punchy, blowing off a little steam. Talk at ryanjesperson.com is where you can send yours. The team at Local Waste, as a core value, holds integrity as its most important thing. It can carry on and perpetuate and also promise its customers. It's literally up on their wall, and that's why they've been reaching out via this Real Talk platform this week to let you know that if you're getting a shady or suspicious email from a new name in the garbage provision business, in the waste management business, give Local Waste a call and ask them what's going on. Some people are feeling like they're being duped into extending bad contracts, and Local Waste is sounding the alarm. If you know what I'm talking about or you want to know more, give Local Waste a shout. You can find all their details online, localwaste.ca. Ask for Mikkel, Lauren, or Chris, and they'll be happy to have that conversation with you. Also want to remind you the teams at Sherwin and St. Albert Dodge know, I mean, you just look at the RV, the trailer market. Buddy mine picking up his fifth wheel today. Congratulations to him. If you're going to be pulling, if you're going to be hauling, you want to do it safely with a truck that is winning all the awards. Ram, the most awarded truck in Canada. You'll find the best selection of Ram at Sherwood and St. Albert Dodge. They share inventories, guaranteeing you the best selection of Ram in the province of Alberta. Well, as mentioned, we heard from Karen a while ago. Karen's a real talker, and she wrote in and she said, "Hang on," she said, "You guys," she said, there's this story that you've got to cover." She says, "You've got to talk to somebody from the Ktunaxa Nation about how they turned the Kootenay Indian Residential School into the St. Eugene Golf Resort and Casino." She says there's an opportunity for people to visit this former residential school to hear firsthand the truth about what happened there. She says you can take guided tours of the building, the interpretive center. You can watch an emotional documentary called Red Brick School, the personal stories of students who were forced to leave their families and attend this church-run residential school. Karen just went on to say this is something, she says, as a real talker, Karen said, by the way, as a Patreon supporter, thank you, Karen. She said, I know that this is something that real talkers would be very interested in hearing as we continue to wrestle with what meaningful truth and reconciliation looks like. It is an absolute pleasure to welcome to the program Sophie Pierre. Sophie is the former chief of the Ktunaxa Kinbasket Tribal Council. Thank you so much for making time for us, and good morning. Welcome to Real Talk.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to join you. I'm very pleased and I'm honored to have an opportunity to share our story.
Well, Sophie, this is a story that residential school survivors and that elders and that Indigenous people have been telling for many years, but it seems to me like the entire country faced a moment of reckoning, starting in Kamloops and now a movement that's making its way across the country in a way that Canadians cannot ignore. Where is your head and your heart at right now, and how is it different, if at all, from where it may have been a month ago?
Well, I want to say that, first of all, it was about 5 or 6 years ago that Canadians really started to wake up to the whole issue of residential schools and what it had actually done with Indigenous people. Before that, there was kind of general feeling or general understanding that, things might have been tough. But, we hear that just, get over it, move on. Everybody else pulls themselves up by their bootstraps. All that kind of sentiment was always going on. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, when the Truth and Reconciliation report came out, that kind of stopped people and they started to think, maybe there's something here. So it was on the one hand, it was a bit disheartening to hear people being so surprised that this discovery had been made, because there's a whole volume, there's 276 pages written about this in the Truth and Reconciliation report. So that was a little bit disheartening, but it's also, I feel now that we really can start talking about the truth. Because see, what happened is that when that report came out, and even before that, you know, there have been many other studies and many other reports that have come out over the last 50, 60 years. And the usual sense for government and for the Canadian public, because life goes on, right? You know, so you just kind of jump over it. And so when the Truth and Reconciliation came out, it was really, really easy for government, including this Prime Minister, to jump over that first part of this report, which is the truth, and jump straight to reconciliation, and then look at us and say, okay, what can we do to help you, you know, in reconciliation? Well, quite frankly, you can go back and listen to the truth, which is what's happening now. And that really is the foundation of what we did here at the Ktunaxa Nation with the Shuswap Indian Band, that we said, and it wasn't my generation that said this, it was our elders. Elder Mary Paul, when we were having meetings and talking about how we were going to be able to hang on to our Ktunaxa language. Our Ktunaxa language is an isolate language in this world. There are no other Indigenous groups anywhere in the world that have language similar to the Ktunaxa language, which is really kind of interesting. And that's another whole story, and I won't get into that. But we are an isolate language. And so we knew that if we lost it, we can't go to our neighbors across the mountains or somewhere else to help us reinvigorate our language. We had to do it ourselves. And so Mary Paul, she told us quite straightforward. She said, you know, if you think you lost so much in that residential school, and she said, in that building, she said, you go back in there and get it. Go back in there and pick it up again. It's only when you refuse to pick something up, when you know it's there, you refuse to pick it up, that's when you really lose it. It took us a while to figure out what she was talking about, because by then the building had been empty for 20 years and it was really, really in bad shape. It was looking pretty ugly. But eventually we figured out what she was telling us, and that's what we've done. And today we have a beautiful resort, 125 rooms in a hotel. We have a casino. We have an 18-hole golf course, and we have a beautiful RV park that is it's top of the line. It's a KOA, so just go online and find us. You'll be really happy you did.
Well, I guarantee you're going to have people checking it out as we speak. Sophie, I'm looking at steugene.ca right now, and obviously a beautiful facility. I'm reading about it, and you write that, to your knowledge, the St. Eugene Mission is the only project in Canada where a First Nation has decided to transform the icon of an often sad period of its history into a powerful economic engine by restoring an old Indian residential school into an international destination resort for future generations to enjoy, which is a really interesting approach. And I want to ask you about that. But first, I'd like to establish for our audience your personal connection here. Do I understand correctly that you yourself were at the St. Eugene Mission as a young girl?
Yes, and at the time it was called the Kootenay Indian Residential School.
Okay.
And I entered there when I was 6 years old, and I left when I was 15. I spent 9 years there. And many of my generation, when we started to talk about what we could do with that building, it was really a tough discussion for us. It was a tough decision for us to take something like that. And you know, many wanted to tear it down. I mean, that's kind of the sort of the natural reaction you get. Well, tear it down, get it off the face of the earth. But even when you do that, that does not at all begin to address what you went through in that building. That is another whole, you know, that's a much bigger step to be taking. So with the guidance of the generation before us, my mother and my grandmother's generation, telling us, no, what you need to do is just take that back. Take it back. And that's what we did. And so we make sure that we tell that, like, when you come to St. Eugene, you're going to have a nice time as a tourist, you know, golfing and all, casino and all that stuff. But you're also, if you are willing to open up your mind, open up your heart, you're going to learn the truth of what happened in those residential schools. And you're going to learn how you then can help and support Indigenous people all over this country on how we can, as many people want us to do, move on, like that's not going to happen until we deal with some real hard truths. And this is one way of doing it. It's not the only way, of course not. There are many ways of doing it, but this is our way as Ktunaxa. And you know what else I want to tell you, I want to share with everyone, is that this decision to create this resort, it was not done, this decision was not brought to us as a proposal by, somebody, some big developer or something. No, this was a decision we made. Because it's on Indian Reserve land, we had to have a referenda in each of our 5 Indian reserves before we could move ahead. If even one community had said, nah, we should tear it down, we would not have been able to move ahead with the business development. But in fact, all 5 communities were overwhelmingly in favor of us going forward. We had one community that every person who voted, 100% said, yes, we want to do something like this. We want to turn this around. We want to take it back and we want to turn it around. So that's the thing I think that means the most to me as a former student from that building, and as a former, as having grown up away from my parents, and a childhood that, when I look at my 6-year-old granddaughter right now, it brings a lump to my throat. I look at her and I think, my God, like she's so beautiful, innocent, and just loves life, and she knows that she's the top of the world. She's got everything in life, and I remember that's what I was like, and I could not imagine having to give her up. I could not imagine that.
Sophie, I'm not sure how much you're willing, or how much you have spoken about your own personal experience at the residential school. Do you remember, at 6 years old, do you remember being taken from your family? Do you remember how your family reacted? Do you remember when you arrived there? Do you have vivid memories of it?
I do. And in my situation, my mother brought me to the school. My mother, she took time to prepare me. She would talk about, I'm going to go to school. And so I was quite excited about it, quite frankly. She bought me a new dress. I had new shoes, little Mary Janes. I, was on top of the world. I thought that I looked pretty smashing, going to school. I was a big girl now. I was going to go to school. But once we got to the building, and I saw the nuns standing there and other children coming in, and I saw the kids crying, and it started to register with me that, in fact, this wasn't such a wonderful thing, and that's why my mother had been so quiet. And so, anyway, it was it was tough. She handed me over to the nuns, and I looked at her, and she just gave me a nod, and she turned around, and the nun took me into the building, and my beautiful little dress and my Mary Janes got taken away, and I was, I had clothes like everybody else did, and cut our hair, and so, and then that was the start of it. I just no longer, I was just one of, we had probably about 150 kids. It was usually what was in our building at the time that I was there, all those 9 years, about half and half, boys and girls. I was on the girls' side. It was kind of funny when we were doing the restoration, and I would bring people into the building trying to, generate the support and enthusiasm that we had for what we were trying to do. But anytime I brought them into the building, I would immediately turn to my left, because that was the girls' side. So there's just some habits are hard to break.
What else did you experience walking in, or what else do you experience walking into that? I feel like I'm asking you incredibly personal questions, and I hope that's okay with you. We can talk bigger picture about the project if you'd like, but
no, that's okay.
Did you have I
think it's important.
Yeah,
I think it's important to get people's personal story, because this is not something you just read about in a book. or act, quite frankly, in a Truth and Reconciliation report, because that's 276 pieces of paper. What I think helps is when you do get that, this happened to real people.
Do you, when people are trying to wrap their minds around, starting in Kamloops and what we're, I suppose, trying to understand, and depending how you characterize them, these undocumented graves or these unmarked graves. Some people are saying mass graves, but basically graveyards of children. Yeah. That's what they are. And they're outside so-called schools, although I remember Jagmeet Singh talked to me a couple of weeks ago. He said he has a really hard time calling them schools. He says they weren't schools. But people are talking about how within Indigenous communities, it was almost, I won't say normal, because there's nothing normal about it, but it was almost just understood that kids would just go missing, that people would just go missing, that nobody really understood what happened to them, that in some circumstances, families weren't even notified when children were sick until they had passed away. Was that part of your lived experience? Was that part of the culture there?
By the time I went to the school, it was not so much, there was not so much of that. What we had, because in the 40s and 30s and 40s, they had like tuberculosis outbreaks, and that was my mother's lived experience. Yes. When I went there, the health situation was somewhat better. I don't recall having, children kind of go missing. What I do have very, very clear memories of, though, are when children ran away, and then when they were brought back, and the type of punishment. One of my best friends there is the lady who, God rest her soul, she's the one that initiated the Red Brick School.
The documentary.
That documentary that we show. Yeah. Yes. And when we were in grade 6, Verge, she ran away from school like it was almost weekly. And every time they brought her back, we would all be lined up and we'd have to watch her being punished. And I would beg her not to leave. I would tell her that, we would, like all of us around her, that we would help her, we would protect her, whatever it was. She just wanted to get out of there. But we didn't want to see her being beaten the way that she would be. So yeah, that part of it, yes, that's my lived experience. Now, in terms of the sort of the unmarked graves, and I know that is the reality of all of these buildings, including our own. We have St. Eugene, the residential school, or our hotel now, that when it was a residential school was part of a mission. This was the mission that was established in the 1880s. And as part of the mission, there's church, hospital, school, the priests and nuns' residences, etc. And they did create a graveyard. So this is like getting on 150 years ago. And over the years, many of the graves have become unmarked for many reasons. The most of which is because they all had wooden crosses, and crosses burn, they rot, and they were never replaced. When we were building out the resort and creating our footprint of what was going to go where, we ensured that all the land that was around the existing graveyard, and it's a graveyard that my community still uses today. We ensured that all the land around it was a protected area. A couple of years ago, my community went to move a fence and, of course, came upon an unmarked grave. So 2 years ago, we started with this whole process of bringing in those GPRs.
This is that radar unit that.
Yeah.
Right.
Ground penetrating radar. Sorry about the acronym.
Yeah.
Ground penetrating radar. We brought in. So we've had that machine, and so we're marking where the actual graveyard actually is, so that as we're rebuilding a falling down fence, we're actually going to enclose and rededicate the area that is the graveyard. So that's one issue. The other issue is, while we're doing that, we know that it's imperative that we also do the ground penetrating radar outside of that, the actual footprint of the graveyard, to see if in fact, God forbid, there are remains of children other than what was in the graveyard. As we were building up the resort, of course, putting in the golf course, you have to dig deep trenches for the water systems, all of that. We did not come upon, obviously, we didn't come upon anything like that as we were building the resort. As we were putting in the lodge, we built a 100-room lodge beside the existing residential school building. And same thing with the casino. But that doesn't mean that we're going to just assume that we don't have that. If anything, I will assume that we'll probably find something. And we need to do that. We need to do that work. And we need to ensure that if in fact we do, that we deal with it in an appropriate way.
Yeah. Yeah, in a meaningful and honorable way. I mean, this entire project is so fascinating. What have visitors told you? I mean, I would imagine there's the odd person that outside of COVID that can head into the casino and they maybe even be unaware of where they are, or maybe people play a round of golf and then they take off. But the people that take the time, the people that take the tour, that watch the documentary, that stay in the hotel, what do people tell you?
We get a lot of different reactions. I think mostly it's this whole thing about, I didn't know. I'm sorry, I just didn't know. And say, well, yeah, we understand you didn't know, but you do now. So make sure you're sharing it with your family and the people that you have connection with. And then take it the next step and make sure that your political representatives are living up to the commitments that they're making now. Back when the Truth and Reconciliation came out the first time, there was all kinds of commitments made by government. There's all those recommendations that are like around 70 recommendation, I think it's 72 or 73 to 78, that speak specifically to these lost children. Yeah, so make sure that they said they were going to follow through on these calls to action. But then the only time that action really happens is when people who vote make sure that it becomes something that is important. And I think right now it is important to Canadians. So let's make sure that our elected officials hear that so that they can instruct their bureaucracies to do something. Because even when we hear nice promises from the politicians, the bureaucracy is set up so that very little ever happens. It's been my experience, and I was the chief for many more years than I think I want to remember. So,
is that elected chief? Is that or hereditary chief?
Elected chief. I was first elected in 1978 when I was 28 years old and full of lots of and figured that I could take on the world and just fix everything.
That's pretty young for a leadership position like that.
Yeah, we've got thankfully we've got lots of young people on our councils today, and it's really, really good.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Let me ask you about something, Sophie. I'm not sure if you've seen this or not, but there's an outlet I mean, I hesitate to even talk about it. I'm not really trying to shed light, but I think sometimes you got to do that. Anyone that's dealt with cockroaches knows that sometimes you got to shine light into the dark areas. It's called the Dorchester Review, and they've been tweeting a whole bunch. I mean, I would describe it as trolling in probably the worst way about residential schools. The real problem, I mean, one of the most significant issues here is that the Dorchester Review is edited by a guy by the name of Chris Champion. Chris Champion is one of the authors of Jason Kenney's new kindergarten grade 6 social studies curriculum in the province of Alberta. So this is a guy that is literally writing social studies curriculum. And here's one example of the tweets that he's been putting out. He shows a photo of Indigenous young children at a residential school playing on a play structure. And he says, quote, "They were put through hell, and yet they're having an absolute blast on that play structure. What gives?" This guy's been denying the impact of residential schools for quite some time, and I could go through his entire Twitter timeline, but it would only probably serve to break your heart and mine or infuriate you. What's your response to that take that they're smiling, they're having fun, it must not have been that bad?
Have you ever seen a child that has an opportunity to get on a play structure that isn't going to be smiling? Even if they're being abused? Even if they're watching their family fall apart, even if they're being told the rest of the time that they are pretty much worthless. I mean, a child is a child. And I actually never heard of this Dorchester and this other person, but it's funny how they want to take one particular incident and paint the whole thing to be like that, as opposed to listening to someone who spent 9 years there. There was a lot. I mean, I could find pictures of myself running around that place laughing or skating, having a good time. But that doesn't take away from the fact that at the same time, I was being taught every single day that my people were products of the devil, that I had to forget my language and who I am in order to be a productive citizen. I could no longer be an Indigenous person. And most specifically, I could no longer be Ktunaxa. Well, thankfully, I had a strong enough foundation from my mother and my grandmother that, they didn't break me down. They broke down a lot of other kids that I went to school with. Half the kids I went to school with aren't even alive today, but their children are, and they deserve to be respected for what their parents went through. So
I appreciate
don't know. This person that's writing curriculum, that's the kind of thing, Canadians say, what can we do to help? You can make sure that BS like this doesn't take over. That's what you can do.
Yeah. I think that I've said this before, and I'm going to keep saying it. Albertans don't vote. We don't expect to see another provincial election for another 2 years. But I think that this curriculum is going to be a major election issue. As a matter of fact, I think that our current premier underestimates how much of an election issue it's going to be. I think it's going to be about coal. I think it's going to be about curriculum and whatever else they get up to over the next couple of years. What would meaningful... let me say reconciliation, or perhaps we say reparation. What does it look like to you when it comes to the church, most notably, but not exclusively, the Catholic Church, the RCMP, and the federal government?
That's quite a trio. But let me say, first of all, before I just want to finish off the last thing that we were talking about. We get a lot of Albertans that come to our resort. And I'm grateful that they're coming out here. And what I want to say to Albertans is, when you're dealing with this, and as you're wanting to know what is the truth, come out and visit us. I know that many go into the Okanagan. So there's a lot of opportunities where you can inform yourself, where you can become an informed voter. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that. But okay, so what is it then that government and RCMP and churches can do? it's like, I guess what I was saying earlier is take a moment, take a step back, and look at the truth. Never mind just jumping over that to get to reconciliation. We need to know what the truth is first. The Catholic Church, they're really, they're having like a real cultural divide in that, a real fight about that, because, you know, on the one hand, there is a recognition that in our instance, ours was a Catholic church, or ours was a Catholic residential school. The whole village, the mission was Catholic right from day one. Actually, you can tell that we were Catholics because the majority of our last names, the names that were given to us, are French, because we had the Jesuits got here first. They beat the Anglicans. Otherwise, we would have had very like English type of names like white and brown colors instead of names like Pierre.
Right.
That's just a little joke I always make when people say, "Oh, how did you get the name Pierre?" And I said, "Well, the Jesuits found us first." But you know, that look at the truth of like why were the missionaries and the police sent out first? They knew that the settlers were coming in, and you know, colonization had to happen, and so they sent out the church and the RCMP to get rid of us. And then if they couldn't, like in one way or another, you know, whatever. And that really didn't happen. I mean, we're still here and we're very strong. And so let's talk about the truth of what the history is of those institutions and the history that they started with, and that particular thread of history that they've carried right through. Because, you know, we just, yesterday, there's the case of that grandfather and his 12-year-old granddaughter. He's trying to open a bank account for his granddaughter. And the two of them end up in handcuffs.
Yeah.
Because the bank can't conceive of the idea that this old man has enough money to give to his granddaughter. God, you know, we got to get beyond that kind of thing. You know, it's kind of funny because I was, you know, talking about that, you know, we're needing to make sure that we have good, solid bank savings accounts for our two little granddaughters. And I thought, do I dare go in the bank? No, I got a good relationship with the Bank of Nova Scotia there. I don't think I'd end up in handcuffs. But I mean, look at that kind of stuff still happens today.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? It means that there's a whole lot of people that still, for whatever reason, don't realize that what their thinking is based on something that has to stop, something that needs to change. And, you know, it starts with our school system. So that's why I'm really worried about this curriculum that you're talking about over in Alberta.
More than worried. It's a step back, Sophie. I mean, if you start digging into it, you'll see it's a disaster. I mean, more than 90% of school boards in the province, including separate and Catholic school boards, rural school boards, more than 90% have refused to pilot the draft curriculum, which is, as far as I'm concerned, an enormous indictment of it.
Yeah.
And it's not just because it's authored in part by a residential school denier, but that's probably a big reason why. But that's not the only reason why. It's really problematic. And as the rest of the country, I mean, we will continue to be a loud voice here, and we will continue to provide a platform for loud voices because we're fighting for this place right now. And
Thank you.
Well, I mean,
Can
you can say whatever you like, my friend. Yeah.
Can I just make one more comment?
Please do.
Because it, of course, leads to the next sort of vocabulary that you hear people using today about how, well, this is all cancel culture. You know, getting rid of monuments and statues, et cetera, are cancel culture. And don't you think that that's just so ironic? Because the reason that this truth needs to come out is because the whole basis of these people and what they did was to cancel culture. It was to cancel the culture so you could cancel the people. That's why they did that.
Yeah.
You know, McDonald, Langevin, Ryerson.
Grandin.
That was their whole point, was cancel culture. So when I hear, you know, Jason Kenney and others talking about, you know, that, oh, we can't have this cancel culture, I think, well, actually, you've had it for the last almost 200 years.
Yeah.
And that's why we're trying to get to the truth so we can move on in a good way. Because we're, like it's been said before, we're all here to stay and we can all do well. Because another truth I know is that when the indigenous people in this country, when they do well, are like, take ourselves, First Nation, when First Nations do well, the whole region benefits. So if nothing else, Canadians, you want to do well, you make sure that the First Nations that are living in your vicinity, that they're doing well, because I guarantee you will do well.
Do you know Grand Chief Billy Morin by any chance? Do you know Chief Morin out of Enoch Cree Nation? I would love to.
From Enoch. Oh yeah.
I would love to introduce you two. I think you guys are kindred spirits. You guys would have an amazing conversation. Both visionaries, really remarkable. Sophie Pierre, former chief of the. Am I saying it correctly? Is it Ktunaxa? Is that how you say it?
Yes. Yes.
Ktunaxa.
Ktunaxa.
Ktunaxa, Kinbasket Tribal Council. Our audience, I mean, you should see the feedback right now. People are blown away by you and your perspective. Thank you so much for making time for us. Congratulations on what is an absolutely remarkable project. As far as we know, the only one of its kind, at least for now, in this country, but really remarkable stuff. People can check it out at steugene.ca, the Casino of the Rockies. The hotel, of course, on the former grounds of the Kootenay Indian Residential School, where our guest, Sophie Pierre, attended. Thank you so much for sharing your personal story with us today.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And come visit us.
Yeah, hey, you don't have to convince me. But I'm gonna, you know what? In all seriousness, I'll come. I'll play. I'll tear up your golf course. I'll shoot 106 on your golf course, Sophie. I'll leave 14 golf balls out there. But in all seriousness, I mean, that's the type of thing where I would need to mentally and emotionally prepare myself. But I'm up to it, and I'll make those commitments. That's what we want to do. Yeah. We want to have uncomfortable conversations. We want to have these important conversations. And what an opportunity that you and your community has provided.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sophie.
Thank you. And
really
I look forward to welcoming you.
I can't wait. I'm looking forward to it. I'll be out there. That's steugene.ca. Our thanks to Sophie Pierre. What a powerful conversation. Yeah. I'd like to actually make a book recommendation. Yeah. Okay. Take care, Sophie. Thanks so much. I want a book recommendation if I can. Well, Sophie was talking. Actually, just true story. Read this just last night. To our little guy, Wyatt. He's 5. He's getting set to turn 6. He's in kindergarten right now. And Sophie talked about her language. Right? And they talked about the unique nature of their language and how it's not spoken by any other Indigenous communities, any other First Nations, anywhere else in the world. I'd like to recommend this book. It's written by Melanie Florence and illustrated by Gabrielle Grimard, and it's called Stolen Words. And read it for the first time last night. It's not the first time it's been read in our family. My wife picked it up, but I read it for the first time to Wyatt last night. It's about a Cree grandfather and his granddaughter, and I won't spoil too much of it, but it's a beautifully written and beautifully illustrated book talking about stolen words and finding them again. And I would recommend that book for anybody that's looking to facilitate some meaningful conversations in their own home. I know a lot of people are somewhat. I mean, the whole stuff about, and again, I just don't even want to talk about it. I don't even want to mention this idiot's name. But these tweets, they keep going out, and he keeps this Dorchester Review. This account keeps pushing out narratives. I mean, we've got another. Let me show you another one here. There's another one where they're saying, "Look at all the kids smiling. Like, look at how everybody's happy." Right? I mean, here's another one, right? It's puzzling, insists this deplorable account. It's puzzling that everybody insists that Indian residential schools were, in quotes, genocidal, yet almost all photographs show children apparently happy and healthy, or at least puzzled, as kids in such photos often are. Are the photos lying? Is some of the testimony dubious? Or were toughest times limited to a certain era? Real Talker Scarlett responded to this, and I think that she nailed it. She said it as well as anybody can say it. Imagine being ripped away from your family and community, beaten and raped, and then your abusers tell you to smile. You fucking smile. So I guess my only response to Chris Champion and the Dorchester Review is, fuck that guy. But the real problem is that he was an author of Alberta's draft K-6 social studies curriculum. A literal residential school denier is literally authoring Alberta's social studies curriculum. This is obviously absolutely unacceptable. And some leadership from the Premier's office would be appreciated. Now, I know that the Premier employed speechwriter Paul Bunner, who's had his own thoughts about residential schools, you know, putting in quotes, the genocide, questioning the impact that it really had on people. I know that the Premier is accustomed to surrounding himself with people that don't share the outrage that the rest of Canada currently feels. But at some point, Albertans have to say, enough is enough. And if this isn't it, I don't know what it is. Now, do I expect Jason Kennedy to say anything? Of course not. But he should. And if he doesn't, then my fellow Albertans need to start holding him accountable. This is completely unacceptable. It's offensive. And it's representing this province in a light that I'm not cool with, and something tells me that you're not cool with it either. So speak up and stand out and be loud and refuse to accept this type of deplorable trolling. I mean, can you feel how I'm feeling right now? I don't understand what could possibly drive somebody right now. What could possibly motivate somebody? Aside from just being a real piece of shit, I can't imagine what would motivate somebody to be trolling and tweeting these types of things as a nation mourns, as orange banners are draped down over murals, as people are wearing moose hide on their lapels, as people are resolving that every child matters, that we will confront the truth, that as a nation we must confront this horrific element of our history. We must confront the truth and we must find reconciliation. And then this is going on? And this is the commentary? Now, if this was just some guy, if this was just your run-of-the-mill racist idiot, I probably wouldn't be featuring it. But there's a reason why this matters, and we've made it very clear here. This cannot be tolerated. And so join me in insisting, consistently insisting, that the Premier hold people accountable and to a higher standard, to a standard that the general public can get behind when it comes to the minimum amount of decency that we require from people that are going to be writing the curriculum that will be taught to our children. That's all I have to say about that. I've already spent too much time talking about this guy, but we will not ignore it. I promise you that. I want to encourage you to take our question of the week this week. You can find it at ryanjesperson.com. Our question of the week that's presented by the team at Y Station. Again, it's right at the top of the page at ryanjesperson.com. I also want to remind you before we sign off today that if you find that these segments are resonating with you, and if you want to share them, we push out our clips each and every day. We do that on social media. We also make it nice and easy. So if you check the description of our past videos, I'm just going to get into this right now. Let me show you what Sarah Hoyles has brought to the table. What an improvement this is. So you go to the Real Talk Ryan Jesperson YouTube page, our YouTube channel. You can find it on the podcast as well. We have it the same way. And if you go under the show description, you're going to find, as a matter of fact, if you try to do it live on the air, you're going to find that the show description doesn't show up, which is problematic. But under this show description, you'll see that it gives us, why are the show descriptions not showing up? Are we finding that we're figuring this out live right now? Our show descriptions are all gone.
No, they're there if you're not signed in.
Because I'm signed in isn't, oh, that's why it's not working. Okay, well, let me tell you this. Under the show description, you've set it up, and I love how you've done it, where people
It was your idea.
Oh, stop
Come
it.
on.
Stop it. You click on the specific time. There's the time code there. So it'll be like 17 minutes, 18 seconds. You click on it. It takes you right to that interview. So if you want to say to somebody, hey, Sophie Pierre was on, this former chief, out near Cranbrook, you have to listen to this interview. You can share the file right there where it starts so people don't have to scroll through. It's been a huge improvement, and we hope that that contributes to more of our content making its way across this country, the conversations that matter. If you're making your way across this country this summer, why not do it with one of those pod-style moving containers? These are the ones that Alta Moving and Storage is making available to their customers. It's like totally changed the game when it comes to moving, right? Because you don't have the big rig, the truck blocking your street, and it's idling, and the movers are ready to go, and your grandfather clock's not even wrapped up yet, and you haven't said goodbye to the room that you brought the baby home to, and you're looking in the backyard, and you wanted to dig out the daylilies to take with you, but we gotta go. That doesn't happen with the pod-style moving container. You move at your leisure. They take the stress out of the game. Plus, they're family-owned, they're locally operating, they're motivated to make your move a positive experience. It's what they're all about. You can find them online. Book your move today at altastorage.ca. You make sure you let them know that you heard about them right here on Real Talk. The team at Kootenay Energy getting set for another inspiring Monday when it comes to positive reflections. They present that. These are your videos, your stories, your photos that have filled your bucket, so to speak. You can send them to us at talk@ryanjesperson.com. Kootenay Energy right now, teams are pedal to the metal, installing solar across Western Canada, residential, commercial, industrial. They do it all. You can find out what they do. Get some great ideas at kootenayenergy.ca. And a shout out to the team at Campers Village with the best gear for right here. They know that many of you are going to be staying close to home this summer, enjoying the amazing outdoor playgrounds that Canada has to offer. Campers Village believes those unique moments build deep connections with family and close friends, and they've been providing gear to make it possible for years and years, including clothing like the latest technical, lightweight, waterproof, breathable threads, fashionable lifestyle clothing, footwear from serious backpacking boots to trail runners to sandals, and even travel gear like luggage. You'll find it all online at campers-village.com. They've got 2 stores in Edmonton as well, 1 store in Calgary, but they'll ship across the country. Most orders over $49 ship for free at campers-village.com. Tomorrow, I don't know much about it, but Sarah Hoyles has already got the round table rolling. We're talking about parking, big cities and parking. We're also going to dig into some of the other stories making news, and there's a pretty good chance that before we wrap, we're going to crack another one of those Jespo Pisco Sours. That's right, it's launch day, my collaboration with Sea Change Brewing Company in benefit of In the Weeds. You can learn more about it by following me on Twitter or Instagram. We'll talk to you tomorrow.